Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining EAC's webinar today. This is Addison Tyne. I am the marketing specialist here at EAC. We will be recording the session today, so pending any technical difficulties, everyone will receive a replay after the webinar. Please feel free to drop any questions in the queue, and we will get to them after the presentation. Following the session today, a short survey will appear, so please stick around and answer these questions after the webinar. Today, I will start off with a short introduction of EAC, and then our technical account manager and Creo expert, Bill Schlund, will be diving into multi-body part design in Creo. At EAC, our mission is to transform the way companies design, manufacture, connect to, and service their products. We are located all over the US, and our headquarters are currently established in Minneapolis. We are more than just a value-added reseller for PTC. We have been partnered with them for over 20 years now, with experts in 22 areas of product development. We offer our customers everything they need for product development, from CAD and simulation software for full product design processes, software for managing service documentation, and software for managing product data. We also implement IoT and AR into business strategies to jumpstart initiatives around digital transformation, connecting all things in your company. We assist with design and engineering products, offer webinars and PTC certified training courses for continued learning. We are also a commercial reseller for Formlabs, offering their latest products in 3D printing, with packages starting as low as $34.99. All in all, we want you to know that EAC is a company to partner with to get all the technology at the forefront of your business to help make your team successful. Now I will hand things over to Bill so he can introduce multi-body part design.
Thanks, Addison. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bill Schlund, and I'm going to be going through some multi-body design and benefits and use cases today. So with the advent of Creo 7, multi-body design has taken root in the software, and it's really a core capability. It affects everything. I think some of you are going to find it to be, if you're old enough to remember a time before microwaves, and now when you look at a microwave, you say, how did I get by without it? Certain instances, this is going to be a big benefit to you. And I'm going to try to highlight some of those by going through some use cases. But first, we'll talk a little bit about the benefits. So there's three big areas that multi-body design can help. The first is generative design. And basically, that allows you to break up your design into different bodies and then saying, I want this body to be the one that's optimized using the generative topology software that PTC bought, actually from Frustum a couple of years ago. Now it's in Creo 7. So in this way, it's just sort of a way of still working in the same PRT file, but having different portions of it, different bodies being optimized. The second is along the same lines, along lines of simulation. In the example we see here in the center, this yellow area here is actually the area that represents the fluid going through this casting. And what we can do is have that a separate body. We can bring that into CFD to do analysis on it, optimize its shape, its curvature for the exact specifications and performance that we want, and then take that body and subtract it from the casting. So as you can kind of see, it's kind of the way that we have worked with Creo in the past. Usually we would use quilts and things like that to subtract out. In this instance, if you think about quilts, you have to use a lot more features to do quilts. It doesn't help with mass properties, really. This is where bodies will come in and make a big difference. And finally, in our third example, in additive manufacturing, what we can do is break our design up into separate bodies and then pick certain bodies to have the lattice structure replace. And so, we could do that before. We would pick certain volumes and, surfaces and surface and bounds and things like that. This is going to make it a lot easier. You can just pick on a body. It grabs everything, say, create a lattice structure here. So these are some examples. The ones I talked about here are leveraging other capabilities outside of what I consider the core capabilities of Creo, or really generating geometry. And so that's really good, but what I wanted to do is kind of highlight we as users, as designers, how can this benefit us? So I'm going to go through 3 examples. The first one, I'm just going to cover the basics of multi-body so we can kind of get a flavor for how it works and how we can work with it. Then I'll go through an example of using it to help conceptualize a design. And then finally, my third example I'll go through, which kind of just working with imported data and how we can kind of leverage multi-body design to work with imported geometry. So with that, let's take a look at Creo. So as I said, my first example that I wanted to go through would be just kind of covering the basics. So right now I just have a couple of sketches out here, right? So sketch 1, sketch 2. We can see them here. And I have regular datum planes and coordinate systems, just like we would in any regular start part. The only thing you'll notice different now that we have multi-body, and this is built in, you can't turn it off, right? This is built into Creo from now until forever. So what we have is a little tab up here that says bodies. And so there's always going to be at least one body. If I don't want to use multi-body design, just keep using Creo the way you always have, and it'll keep working the way it always has. But with multi-body, it's going to allow us to leverage and kind of work with things in a little bit different fashion. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to first of all just take some areas here, and I'm going to say let's extrude those and kind of flip the direction and maybe give it, a half. Let's say 5, something like that. So now we have our first extrusion. And really, it's the first real geometry, solid geometry that we have in our body here. It still says there's a single body here, but you notice when I put my mouse over it, it highlights it. And the same with the extrude. If I put my mouse over the extrude, so our model tree will always be the way it always has been. All the features in this PRT file will always be here. And we'll see some things, how this changes a little bit when we work with multi-body. Next thing I want to do is let's take this and kind of make it kind of a cutout or just kind of remove material a little bit. So I'm just going to drag him down and do something like that. So again, we've got our extrusions here, and it's just still a single body. I've still been working on this one body that we have here. I'm going to hide sketch number 1 since we don't really need him anymore. And we can start thinking of creating this other geometry here. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing that I did before. I'm going to say, let's grab some of this and we'll extrude this out. And again, maybe give this a value. Now at this point, if I were just to say complete this, it would make still a single part, right? Just as Creo always has. And this would be more or less kind of a bracket. But really I want to have this to be 2 separate parts. So you'll notice in the feature tab, I have a button right here for body options. And I can say create a new body here. And it's going to say, I'll say that, and right away it switches it to body 2. Again, I can rename these to whatever I want, but it's creating a second body. Now, if I say, okay, I have 2 there. It still kind of looks like 1 because they're the same color, but the interesting thing is that I can go over here and say, let's make body 2. Let's kind of expand this out. Make it yellow. So now, you notice under our bodies, it's almost like a little subassembly. I have body 1, I can expand that out, and I can see the features that make up body 1. I can expand out body 2, and he just has the one extrude. So we can kind of see how these are kind of a subassembly. They'll have their own features. Each body will have separate features. An interesting thing you saw that I could go in here and I could apply a different color. Another thing with bodies, if we pick on this body here, I can rename him and call him like shaft support, or create the other one and call him base. So there's a lot of things that we can do. We can give them their own parameters. We can give them their own model properties, mass properties, and things like that. So let's kind of continue on a little bit. I'm going to extrude out some other things that are here. And we'll say, let's extrude this out. And we'll flip him around. not remove material. So now we've got a little area added here. And you notice it added it to body 2. The reason being is that is the active body. See the little green star? Just like in assembly mode, that is our active part. So as I create features, they will take place in that part. Again, that extrude, I could have said make a new body, right? So in extrudes, you'll notice we have these body options here. If I go over to sweeps, body options there. If I go to revolves, same thing. Go to swept blends, body options are there. If I go to rounds, no body options, right? Because rounds have to go on a body. And by the edge you pick, it knows what body to go to. If I pick a hole, this is kind of interesting. There is an option for bodies, but basically it's saying which bodies do you want this hole to be in, right? Sort of like an assembly feature. And so I've got this going so far. Let's go and make some rounds and I'll show you something that's kind of interesting. Now remember, body 2 is the active part. But like I said, rounds and chamfers and things like that know what features or bodies they're working on. So I'm putting some rounds on bodies 1. That's great. Put another one here, another one there. So I've got these rounds put on, but it's crossing bodies, right? If I finish this off, you notice we just have the single round feature here, but in body 1, I have rounds that just apply to body 1, and then body 2, I have the rounds that apply to body 2. So rounds are specific to the body that they get put on. So those type of features will just be applied to, again, the body that they're applied to. So now we have this going. Let's take a look at some things that we might want to use or take advantage of by using bodies. So right now we just got this big block sitting here. I'm thinking of the first piece or the first body that I made. Let's say I want to shell this out. Now, if this is a full solid feature, both of these were added together, I'd have to do remove and don't use a lot of these surfaces because I just want to shell out the bottom part. But I'm going to make body 1 our active body. And then I'm just going to use a shell, right? And we'll just say, let's take this and kind of hollow it out. So now we have a shelled feature. And again, it only takes place on body 1. Another thing I could do while we're here, let's make a section view of this guy. I'll kind of move him back, maybe kind of like halfway there. An interesting thing is because these are 2 different parts, when I show cross sections, we can see that they can be cross-hatched differently as well. So let's call this guy, I guess we'll give him a name, call him cross section A. Okay, so you can cross section through a multi-body part as well. So now that I have this, let's go and try to think about maybe how right now they're just sitting on top of each other, right? 2 separate parts sitting on top of each other. So maybe I want to kind of fit them together. I'm going to put a little peg in body number 2. So again, I'm just going to activate him and say, let's create a sketch, I guess. So we'll say, let's extrude, and we'll say define a sketch. You can pick on this surface. And let's just make, make a circle, maybe right here, something like that. So now when I take this, I extrude it out, there's my protrusion coming through, and so now body 2 is going through body 1. If I hide 2, you notice there's no hole in 1. So what I want to do is make use of Boolean operations. So under bodies here, what we've been doing so far is it's just been, we've just been creating bodies on the fly and just saying, we want this geometry in one body, this one in the other. In this particular case, I'm going to do a Boolean operation. And the first thing I'll say the body that we want to modify is actually body 1. And then the modifying body will be body number 2. And we're going to say we want these to subtract. So now we can see body 2 is cutting a hole in body 1. But it also got rid of, we did a subtraction, got rid of all of body 2, and I want to keep it. So I just hit this option here, let's keep it. So now it has a hole in it and a hole in the first part, and we still have the boss in the second one. I want to do something real quickly. Let's just make a drawing of this, just so I can show you how drawings work. Again, this is still a PRT file. So I'm going to say, let's make the drawing the same name as our part that we have here. And let's use a template. So here's our different bodies brought up here. I'll take this view and say, let's use that section that we had. Let's say, let's add in section A. I'll put the arrows in that view. Apply that. And then maybe in the display, you can say no hidden. So here we can see the different cross hatchings. And again, we can modify these independently. You can see the views over here. What's really interesting is I have a bill of material of a part file. I have material applied to each one. And I can actually, like I said before, I have different parameters and things like that in this drawing of a part. Let's go back to our main part that we're working with here. And now let's say we want to go in and do something else. So I'm going to say, let's create a third part. So I'm going to say, let's use sketch regions. I'll pick that. I'll say, let's extrude that out. And in this case, we'll make it symmetric, I guess. So we're making a shaft for this guy. So here's our shaft. And in this case, I want this to be a brand new part, right? It's a separate part. I'll say, okay. So now we have body 3 sitting over here. And you notice that he becomes the active body because I just created him. Here I could come in and say, let's assign material. Let's make him steel. So again, we have 3 parts. Again, I can color them all differently. But if I go back to my drawing, we can see that the material properties are updated for our shaft, and obviously crosshatch and everything else is updated as well. If I need to show dimensions, I can just say show dimensions in this view. I'm just going to show all of them just for the sake of expediency. And now we have that dimensioned. But it's still a PRT file. If I want to go back to this, one of the things I can do with a body is I can set it as a construction body. So in that case, it doesn't show up in a bill of material. It doesn't contribute to mass properties. So basically, it would be a body that I might leverage some edges or some geometry off of it, but it's really not part of what I'm designing. And then I can also say, let's create a part from that base part. And now I can give it a name, call it base 101 or whatever, and I've got a whole separate part, and then I can create an assembly. Here it's kind of an assembly in a way, right? Multi-bodies, but it's not a typical ASM file. So that's my first example of working with multi-bodies. Let's take a look at another example. I'm going to call this guy up and let's talk about conceptualizing things a little bit. I'm going to turn on an image here. So I got this from an ID guy. He says, will you design this for me? Right? And ID guys think of things in a certain way and engineers think of it in a different way. And for me personally, I don't know how many parts his idea is going to be. I mean, is it going to be 2 parts, 10 parts, 15 parts? I don't know. That's what I have to do is figure it out. But at least I got the basic geometry, and then I can start chopping it up and making sense of it in terms of separate components. So that's what I'm going to do here, is we'll go back here and we'll make use of these sketch regions because they're pretty useful. And I'll say, let's revolve that. So here's our first body again. By default, the first feature becomes the first body. And I could come in and say, let's add a round. This will be kind of a base. I know that maybe this will be a separate part. Let's make them like 1/4 of an inch. And also while I'm here, maybe I'll come in and shell this guy out. And then maybe apply, a color to him. Let's see what we got. Paint. Let's say black. I'll apply that to our body 1. So now we've got a part created. Now I want to start creating some of the other geometry. So again, I'm just going to start picking some things. We'll include this guy as well. And again, while I'm conceptualizing, I'm just making a big blob at this point. But I'm going to make it its separate part because we know we created the first part. So we know this is going to be at least a second part. But in this particular part, I might want to break it up where I have a middle portion and I have a top part. So 2 different parts. I'm going to break this guy up. So I'm going to use something I haven't used yet, and it's called a split. But I'm just going to say, let's split the second body, and let's split it with maybe this surface. By doing this, it creates 2 bodies. So now under our bodies, you notice we have body 1, with our base, body 2, which is the top, and the middle one is body 3. So I can rename him to middle or whatever, but let's kind of isolate him for a second. And as we're looking at him, this is where I can come in and start to say, well, if, kind of more fully define this part, maybe I want to make it kind of shelled out. I could say, let's apply maybe glass to this part so we can kind of see through it. And it's a little too see-through. Let's just make them more smoky, like that. All right, so now I have our other bodies. Here's, if we take a look at the first one, our design is starting to come along pretty well. Let's turn on our top part. For this particular one, I might say, oh, let's go in, and we might want to make this kind of bow out and kind of fit with that. So I'll just use kind of flex modeling. I can just kind of use an offset of that surface. And let's give it a value of 0.5. And we can see now we've got it nice matched up with this. So we've got 3 parts. And now I'm going to go and say, well, let's kind of continue on. Let's make some other parts. So I'm just going to go under, let's go back to regular modeling here. I'm going to say, let's take this and this part, and we'll revolve that. We're doing a lot of revolves today. I'll make a 3rd part. So now we have the 4th part, or yeah, part number 4, and we could say, let's make him black. If we go back to our top part here, let's activate him for a second. Let's hide this guy. Then I'm just going to say, shell this guy out. So as you can tell, it's really easy for me to kind of conceptualize, start to create parts and figure out exactly how this thing is going to be created. Now, right now, we don't really have a hole in this part, right? This guy's just going, this little plunger is just going right through it. So this is where I can make use of, again, the Boolean operations, where I'm going to say, I want to take this guy and I want to subtract this guy from him. We can see that we have the subtraction done, but again, we also want to keep him. So now I've created really quickly 4 different parts, and now I can go through and maybe extract each one of these out, extract them out as a part, and then put them in an assembly, because potentially I'm going to want to create maybe a cylindrical joint in here so I can actually activate this and move it up and down. But again, this is allowing me to create in a single part file from where I've derived or got a sketch, an idea, and kind of broke it into multiple parts. So as far as allowing me to kind of conceptualize and create things that way, it works out really well. So the final example I wanted to bring in is working with imported geometry. So this guy is just a big import feature, right? Just a big blob here. What I want to do is actually kind of modify him a little bit, break him up, and make him into an assembly. So the first thing I'm going to do, and we can kind of do a search for bodies here, which will make it a little bit easier. I'm just going to say, let's split this body with a plane. So now I've got two bodies created, right? And we can kind of see them in different colors. I'm going to say, let's take this body, and we want to split him with a different plane. So now I have three parts, right? And we can see body 1, 2, and 3. This is the one that I'm interested in, which would be body 1. And I want to take him, and let's grab him and then go into flex modeling for a second. And I'll say that I want to move that first one, and let's zoom in here and kind of rotate it about the center here. So I'm just going to kind of rotate this body, maybe like that. So now I've kind of taken body number 1 and rotated them a little bit. Now I'm going to make use of some of the capabilities. I kind of have a big gap in here and got some overlaps over there. So I'm going to go into the Boolean. And I'm just going to say, let's take that one and add it to this one. We're doing a merge. We say, okay, now where we had 3 bodies, now we just have 2. And one of the cool things about flex modeling is that it heals itself. So I'm going to pick on a surface there, pick on a surface there, say remove it, closes it right up. Same with this little overlap stuff here. Just grab some surfaces and say remove those. So now I've kind of taken this body here and modified him a little bit. I'm going to go back and grab him and say, let's move him maybe in this direction. I'll say maybe a distance of like 20. So now I've taken the 2 bodies. Not only have I modified one of them, but now I've split them apart. So now they're totally separate. Now, something that I haven't used yet, as we looked under this body menu, we have the Boolean operation. So we've been adding and subtracting things. We have been splitting things. I've been splitting things here, obviously. Now I'm going to create a new body. So an empty body, before when I'd create some geometry, I'd say make it into a new body. But in this case, I'm just going to create sort of like an empty file. We'll give it, let's just give it a different name. We'll call it a wheel. So now we have that new body, and we can see that he's the active one, right, by the little indicator here. And now I want to start creating some geometry for him because he's empty right now. I'm going to say, let's create an extrusion. We'll kind of sketch on here. Let's make a circle, maybe like that. Make another circle there. And then we'll give him a depth of, I think I moved it 20. Yep. Say okay. So now I've got 3 parts. We can come over here, say, let's make that new body, let's make them yellow. So now we've got basically a 3-part assembly here, where I started off with a single import feature. I was very easily able to kind of slice and dice it. the way that I wanted, be able to make some modifications, and then add my own geometry in there that I might want to make to really finish up this design from, maybe what I'm getting from a customer, and then maybe this is some of our value added capabilities that we're putting in here. But the idea that I wanted to get across to everybody today is that, and I was using just kind of core modeling techniques here today, but once you start thinking about things in terms of body design, multi-body design, it kind of, you'll think a little bit differently the way that you have before. Just like when you got your microwave, you kind of started saying, wow, I can do things really quick now. It's going to be like that with this. So good luck with this when you move to Creo 7. Like I said, this is omnipresent. It's everywhere. All the modules understand it, So and we can do this with sheet metal as well. I didn't really highlight and do any sheet metal stuff. But if you have multi-body design, only one of the bodies can be a sheet metal part. The other ones would be solid geometry, maybe like PIMs or something like that. But in sheet metal, you would just have one of the bodies be sheet metal. But that's the only thing to make count of there. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Addison as I've reached the end of what I wanted to talk about.
Thanks, Bill. And it does look like we do have a couple questions in the queue here. First off, Mark is asking, can I take the multi-body part and turn it into 3 separate components of a named assembly file? And then he said, otherwise, it seems it would be better to just make the assembly from the beginning using Create. And how is this controlled in Windchill?
Good question. So you can create a single part, break it into 3 bodies, and then you would extract out like that one right mouse button option, 2, 3 separate parts. The thing is, then you'd have to create the assembly, because if you wanted the .asm, you can't extract them into an assembly. So in that particular example, yeah, it'd be more work using multi-body, right? Because you could just make the 3 separate parts. Again, there are some advantages, all designing those parts in a single PRT file and parting them out. But to create that assembly file, yes, you would have to extract those 3 parts and then reassemble them basically together. As far as Windchill works, Windchill understands multi-body from the standpoint it's just in a PRT file, right? So it's just, as far as I know now, it just looks at it as just a regular PRT file, not really seeing the individual bodies in there. Again, the drawing for that PRT file would have potentially the bill of material listing out those bodies. But again, I haven't tested that out, but that's what I would suspect until I find out differently. So thanks for your question, Mark.
Awesome. And then we do have another one. They asked, in the first example, can you add a round onto the inside corner between the 2 bodies?
That's a good question. Let's see if we can say. I don't think I erased him. So I think you want to have a round right between those 2 right there. So let's give it a shot, because I don't know. So we'll say, let's put in a round. You can't do a round between 2 parts, right? So I can't do a surf round or anything like that. So if I do put it on an edge, it will go inside like that. So rounds only attach themselves to a part, but I can't do a surface to surface round between 2 bodies. That doesn't work. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Anything else, Addison?
And then Mark also, I think it might have been part of his question. He said, and a step export would have all of the parts as a single object.
If we were to create a step file of this, would it be 3 separate parts? Step does understand bodies, I'm pretty sure. So let's do something. Let's do a save a copy, save it as, I put step up at the top. Yep. and we'll save it to my desktop. We'll see under options, I think there are some things as is. I don't see bodies here, but I'm pretty sure that step understands bodies. Well, we'll find out. At least I'm just using like the basic stuff here. We'll say, okay. So now we'll close this guy out. Let's say, let's open desktop. Say all files. And here's our step file. If we open him up and say anything here for bodies, and it sees it as an assembly. We open that. We got 3 separate guys. Yep. So hopefully that's what you were looking for. So step does break them out as separate bodies, as separate entities, parts. As you can see, it brought it in as an assembly. All right. Anything else, Addison?
Okay, and then Mark said thank you. And then Jason also asked, instead of a fillet, I think I said that right, what about a weld feature between bodies?
So weld has changed, and I would suspect that it would work, and we'll go give it a shot. But the thing is that before, like in Creo 6, you could never weld between 2 surfaces that weren't touching each other. Now in 7, you can. So I'm going to say, let's try a weld. Let's do fillet weld. We'll say, we'll pick, and we'll pick this face, and the second one will be this one. Let's see if we can make him a solid. And maybe 5. Oh, a little big. So it looks like it's going to work. So solid weld between those 2 bodies, yes. Good question. I like that one.
And then Steven is asking, can you easily break up a step import that is one body into an assembly?
Good question, because if the step comes in at one, you can cut it up as I did with, for basically that was a step file with my third example. But then to get it into an assembly, you would have to you could step it out and step it back in. It comes in as an assembly, as we saw, if it's separate bodies. Or you could, I guess, extract each one of those as separate parts and then reassemble them, which would be kind of a lot of work. I'm thinking almost step out and step it back in. You got a step assembly that way, and then you can start working with the individual parts. Maybe that might be the quickest, the most efficient way of doing it.
Awesome. And Stephen asked, I think in regards to his can you easily break up a step import question? He asked, will it recognize the bodies?
Well, the step file, if it came in as an original single part, and then we part it out, that's a good question. Let's see if we want to open the third guy that we had here. So this was an import, and it was a single feature, and we broke it into 3 different bodies. It doesn't look at it as an assembly at this point, right? That was my point before of saying step it out and step it back in, and then it would see these as 3 separate parts. If we go into, let's go into redefine this guy. See, all this happened afterwards, but what I want to do is see if the import data doctor, how it, yeah, see, it's going back to when it was just a blob like this. and I can't really redefine any of these bodies. So it won't, the only way to get it as an assembly, if it came in as a single part, would be, I guess, stepping it back out and back in again. It would bring in these bodies. But once I've cut them up, it doesn't really see it. I mean, now we're kind of in the Creo world here and no longer in kind of using the step stuff. I don't think that's going to work. Hopefully I understood your question.
Okay, and then we have one more, I believe, from Daniel. He said, you imported the step file as an assembly. What if you imported as a part? That was an option when you were importing it.
Yes, it was. So let's try that. Let's say open. Let's close this guy out just so we don't have any extra stuff here. I'll say open desktop. We switch to part, create part 00, that's fine. Yeah, this will be interesting to see. Yep, comes in as one big import feature, merges them together. So I guess you can keep them separate or bring them in as a part. That was good. Good point you brought up there. Haven't tried that.
Awesome, and that does look like we answered all the questions in the queue there. So I just want to thank everyone for coming on the webinar today. And I do want to let everyone know, if you want to bring up that last slide there, Bill, we have extended our promotion of 50% off eligible Creo extensions. And we will be providing a link to this promotion in the follow-up email being sent out later this afternoon. So watch for your email for that. Also, in the next slide, there is a list of our upcoming webinars in this Creo series. So we hope you guys can join us next week. We will be doing a webinar called What's New in Creo Simulation Live. And then another reminder, there will be a short survey once we end here, so please stick around and please answer those questions for us. And thank you again, everyone. We hope to see you next week and have a great rest of your day.